everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, a special bonus edition. I'm Robert Perry Cruz, your host for this bonus edition. I'll be joined later by our special guest, Whitney Hammel from Autism Compassion Africa, and of course by my fabulous co-host, Diana Perry Cruz. Now, the reason you're getting this bonus episode is because right now it's Autism Awareness Month worldwide. And for Autism Awareness Month, we wanted to do something special. We wanted to do something where we could share information, where we could donate money. And Diana had worked with Whitney in the past and knew that she had just recently opened up a school for children with autism in Ghana, and that the school was completely funded by donations. So we thought, what better way to support autism awareness than by sharing information from an area of the world that at this point, as you'll hear in the interview, has only one BCBA. So we thought, what better way to share some awareness than by bringing some light to this very underserved area of the world. So without further ado, here is our interview with Autism Compassion Africa's Whitney Hammel. So we're talking on the phone from all the way from Cape Coast in Ghana. We're talking to Whitney Hammel from Autism Compassion Africa. Whitney, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. It's nice to talk to you and Diana. How are you doing?
Whitney.
We're doing
great.
Fine.
Hi, Diana.
Hi.
We're really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you, talk about your work out in Ghana, and to talk about your group, Autism Compassion Africa. So why don't you start by telling our listeners just about yourself?
As you mentioned, my name's Whitney. I'm here in Ghana, but I'm originally from the West Coast and spent most of my career off and on working for the New England Center for Children in Boston, Abu Dhabi, and as well as working to run a center in India on their behalf. So I've spent a lot of time overseas. The previous 2 years, I spent time running an ABA center in Gurgaon, India, outside of Delhi. And then I sat down one afternoon with a really good friend of mine who did her master's degree research here in Ghana in global health, and we realized we could work together and create Autism Compassion Africa. So I relocated just this past August and opened the center in October of 2017 here in Ghana.
Okay, so that's kind of a whirlwind tour around the world to provide services for individuals with autism. Very nice.
Yeah, you went from the west coast of the U.S. to the west coast of Africa.
Exactly.
So before we get into your work, what is it like in Ghana? Because I think especially nowadays, most people probably when they think of Africa now they're thinking of the Black Panther movie is probably the new sort of view. Yeah. Like a lot of superheroes there. I don't know. What is it like?
Hey, I tell you, I went to go see Black Panther here, and it was quite crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone was lined up and dressed up too, and I even dressed up a little bit
awesome.
as well. But Ghana is a fantastic country. I think the piece that really resonates with me is the people. Mm-hmm. They really have a sense of community here, mm-hmm. and everyone is super friendly. As you walk down the street, they'll greet you, people that you've never met before, and you just have a really strong sense of community here, and that really drew me to the culture. And then, of course, the sunshine helps. You know, you guys have been getting hounded with a bunch of snow lately, and I'm completely happy to be, a 2-minute walk to the beach. So things are pretty good here in Cape Coast right now.
That's awesome.
So only a little bit of snow in Cape Coast is what you're saying, or no snow? No snow at all?
Yeah, just a dusting. No, we're good. We're good over here.
And what kind of so Cape Coast is a city? It's a large city, small city?
Yeah, it's one of the 10th largest cities in the country, but it actually, in a way, is a small city. It's more of a fishing community. So most of the people who are working there are the fishermen. There's not a lot of business. There's a university, and there's a lot of boarding schools. So Cape Coast is actually known for education and being a place to send your children to get schooled. But
cool.
I love the community. It also has a very rich history in a good and a bad way, because that's also where the slave trade had started. During the time of the slave trade, they have a big castle in Cape Coast, and then down the road in Elmina is another castle built by the Portuguese in the late 1400s. So there's a very rich history in Cape Coast area.
So given that Cape Coast is known for education, did you find, were you surprised either positively or negatively about how hard it was or challenging it was to set up the center?
One of the reasons why we chose Cape Coast is that once you get outside of the capital of Accra, there's really not a lot of opportunities for children with special needs. Mm-hmm. It's very, very limited. And even in our city, Cape Coast has 170,000 people in it. Mm-hmm. Yet there is one other small school that is more of like a care facility than a school. And then the university also has a special education program. But other than that, there's nowhere for these kids to go. And we wanted to not just be where everyone else is. We wanted to reach those families that need help. Basically, we're about a 3-hour drive from the capital, but still in a large enough city that there's plenty of children with autism and special needs. And we already have a wait list that's continuing to grow day by day.
Yeah, 170,000 is a pretty big city.
Yeah, it is.
So
it feels like
what
a
type
small
of
city when you're there, but
yeah.
it is actually pretty big when you look at the numbers of it.
Yeah. So what type of education is available for kids with special needs?
So many of these students, they might start in their younger years in like a nursery or a general ed setting. Unfortunately, many of them get kicked out. Mm. You know, these teachers aren't trained. They don't know how to work with children with special needs. There's also a lot of stigma. You know, I had this one father that I was working with who told me that his son was kicked out of the classroom because the teacher was pregnant and she was worried her baby was going to catch autism.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, there's all these misconceptions out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stigmas. They think it's a curse or, you know, the child is a witch or a wizard. And so there's a lot of aspects in that way that prevent these children from being able to be in the general education setting, as well as teachers just not having training and support in knowing how to work with children with special needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's encouraging if you said there's a special education program at the university.
There is, yeah. It actually goes all the way through a PhD, I believe, in special education at the University of Cape Coast.
Nice.
So it sounds like the perception of children and young adults with special needs has been shifting somewhat. Well, I don't know about rapidly, but it's definitely been shifting in the past few years. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, I believe so. You know, I'm still new here to Ghana, but even within Accra, there used to only be a couple of small schools, and now there's got to be at least 10 or more different centers for children with autism or special needs in the capital. So it's shifting, but it starts shifting first more in the big urban cities before it spreads out to rural communities. Mm-hmm. You know, and unfortunately, these children, I mean, it's really heartbreaking because what's different here is you have to work around the human rights aspect of this quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Many of these kids are hidden away, and, you know, the most extreme is termination of life, because sometimes they may not be seen as human. They may be seen as having a demon in them. And people will take them to these specific places where these people called fetish priests will just drown the child in the river and return the child to the river because they're a river snake. They're not a human.
Wow.
And then there's also these prayer camps that are around. And at these prayer camps, if you look up, you know, the Human Rights Watch organization, they've done some reports on Ghana, and there's all sorts of very upsetting information coming out about children and, you know, adults being basically like chained up and very poor treatment. There are mental institutions here, and there's a lot of mistreatment that happens, and children with special needs kind of end up being dumped at these mental facilities. And so there's a long way to go here in combating the stigmas against those with special needs.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into telling us all the things that your organization does in addition to being a school.
So we're just a small school. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually the only BCBA in West Africa right now.
I did not.
I hope there's many more people listening to this that want to come.
How often in your life do you get to be the only one of a job or any sort of skill in a whole region, geographical region?
That's kind of neat. I can't think about it too much because it's overwhelming. But I can tell you, I get calls from, you know, Gabon, Senegal, Burkina Faso. I get calls from people needing help, and I'm doing what I can, but we need more people. West Africa is the size of the United States.
Right.
Mhm.
And there's me. And there's a couple of BC ABAs right now in Nigeria. But one piece that we're really passionate about, and it's something that is how we're going to help bring ABA here and also change more lives here in West Africa, is to get more people certified within the country, within Ghana, and across the region. So when I was working in India, I had 8 staff under me who did their continued education for the BCBA long distance learning. Mm-hmm. And we hope to do that with our staff in the future. There's one other center that does ABA in the capital here, and they have a couple of people who are looking to do their coursework. However, when your salary is small and the coursework is triple your monthly salary, that can be a lot of money. And it's, we're only going to be able to do this with support. Right. So if there's people out there listening that are in the education field that can help provide scholarships for those within the country to go forward to get their coursework completed, I'm happy to provide supervision hours for these individuals. So that's part of our mission, is continued education. We want to plant the seeds so that, once you get a few more BCBAs in the country, then they can help other people get certified, and it can just spread, right? Mm-hmm. It just kind of spreads like wildfire that way. We also are, we do the direct services. So we have the small school in Cape Coast. Right now I have 8 students, and it's 1 teacher to 1 student.
Okay.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment.
Okay.
And then we also are trying our best to combat the stigmas and raise awareness. So it's difficult to talk much about ABA to people if they don't even know what autism is, right? We just signed a partnership with another nonprofit who is a 3-year-long partnership to work to train community health workers in rural communities on autism awareness and special needs, and then they can spread it out. So we're using it's a model of training community health workers that is a common researched one in the field of global health, and we're hopeful that will make an impact on the human rights aspect of how these children are treated.
Great. So, Whitney, how much of your time as a BCBA would you say you spend doing what we'd expect, BCBA work to look like, and how much do you feel you're spending the time just working on outreach, trying to set up these partnerships? Because it sounds pretty daunting.
Yeah, I wear a lot of hats, but it's okay. And I'm lucky that my co-founder, she stays in Seattle. She comes out every couple of months, and she's our operations director. So she also helps quite a bit with some of this stuff. But part of my time, I'm not always at the center because I'm also out providing trainings to other schools. I just came into Accra this week to provide a couple-hour intro to ABA training for another inclusive school that's here. And I've done it for a couple of schools in the area, just trying to plant those seeds that way and getting people to understand the principles of behavior, more information about reinforcement and functions of challenging behavior. And so, part of my time is spent at the center doing the direct clinical work. But even at the center, there's a lot of other things. I'm also the plumber and all these other things. That's why we need more people that have a passion to come make a difference and to come out this direction. And even if it's not directly with us, but just here doing this work is important.
I think we were going to do plumbing on one of our future episodes, so I guess listen up. Maybe we'll have some. I'm joking there. That's not a job I think any of us expect to do. You start a business, you think, I'm dealing with insurance companies. I think is the main concern here, here in the States. And for you, it sounds like it's just the daily functioning of the space is a challenge.
Yeah,
I saw I saw the pictures of the new playground that you guys put together. It's beautiful.
Yes. We are so excited. We had some great donors give the funds to have a playground built, and there's another educational nonprofit here in Ghana that builds similar playgrounds. So we had the same guy come and construct it, and we use a lot of recycled materials, and the kids are loving it, especially the swings. So it's been great. But I helped. I think you're referring to the picture of me painting.
Yes.
But, sometimes that's me, trying to escape some of the tasks that you don't really want to do. So you go and do something like painting for an hour or two to get your mind clear before you jump back to the other.
Absolutely.
But,
I hear that.
Yeah.
So what is the day-to-day at the school itself? So when you're sitting down and you're actually doing your work as a BCBA, you're working with the students, you're working with staff. Is that very similar to your experiences in India and in America? Is it different in some ways?
Yeah, it is. And, we're really lucky that because of my relationship of working with the New England Center for Children, they've been very supportive and have given us access to the Autism Curriculum Encyclopedia.
Oh, that's
So
great.
we are using the ACE here, which is fantastic. And our students, most of them just joined within the last couple of months. So lately it's been a lot of IEP meetings, actually, is what we've been doing. I've been spending the majority of my clinical time and setting those up and getting the curriculum out. The biggest challenge I think for me to start was the fact that I was training brand new staff without having current staff for them to observe. So, and there weren't students at the time. A lot of our learning during that beginning time comes from observation and being on shift, being there to shadow another teacher and practice back and forth. So that was a little difficult. And so right now, because we don't have senior teachers, they're all less than 7 months old or 6 months old. It's a lot of time in the classroom as well, modeling how to run these curriculums, which it should be anyway, but even more so.
Well, yeah, there's a big difference between, and I have to go do something else, watch this individual who I've already trained to mastery, when everyone's got to still be trained to mastery, and you're the only model available. It sort of cuts down on how much you can sort of spool out that training. You mentioned student IEPs. Is the special education process similar to how it is here in America, or have you found learning that to be very different?
I mean, I think I just kind of call it an IEP because there isn't really a formal, it's not, there's not like a law binding type of document that we create, but we create something similar here. We do assessments. I sit down with the staff. We discuss some goals, and then we have the parents come and we listen to their concerns and what goals they'd like to work on, and we present our information and our data, and then plan going forward and create the goals from there. And so our IEPs are not as detailed, but list out the goals that we have in the various areas and the baseline and the typical background of the student, but it's not the same formal document that you would have in the U.S.
What has feedback from parents been like? Have they wanted to be more included in the process? Or they're just learning about what autism is, so they don't even know what they'd ask?
All of them so far have just seemed extremely grateful because they didn't really have places before to take their children, or where they had taken their children was more of like a daycare type of setting. So the parents, I mean, they've all been fantastic. They've been fairly involved. There's some that are more than others, of course, but in general, it's just been, I think, a brand new experience to them, and they seem very happy to have someone really care and get to know so much about their kid. So it's been great that way.
Have you been working on a parent training component? Still kind of early to be adding that on as one of your hats?
Yeah, that's something that is definitely, it's been one of those things that I've been planning, but with all of the hats on, I haven't got to yet, but it is very important. I know that in my time spent in India, running parent training was really a big piece of it, as well as doing home visits. So once our students start their IEPs, and about half of them have, we're just getting started with the IEPs, and then we're going to be doing home visits once a month, if possible, if the parents are open to it, where we can dive in a little deeper on individual goals with the parents. But doing some overall parent training is on my list. It hasn't started yet, but I definitely, through my experience, have seen that be something that's very valuable and necessary for a program to be successful, and for the best for the students too.
Now, have you had to have a lot of dealings with local governments or larger city education boards? I'm not sure exactly the setup. Or is it sort of been you have your groups you've been working with, and other than that, everyone's just happy that you're there and they just sort of let you go ahead and do whatever you need to do. You're the expert.
Yeah, it's been a mix. There's been some different individuals who are very happy to have me come talk to them. There are others who are a little hesitant, right? You know, who is this foreigner coming in? There's a particular person that does a lot with special education that I've had a letter on their desk requesting a meeting for some time, and it hasn't happened. So we just keep pushing. And, you know, honestly, what I'm focused on is doing good work with the kids that we do have. And then I believe people will come to us with time as well. You know, we can knock on doors too, but sometimes you just got to prove yourself a little bit before they'll take you seriously, especially as a foreigner coming in. Sometimes they might question, okay, are these people coming for the right reasons, or are they just here to make money? We're not here to make money. We're doing a lot of fundraising outside of the U.S., outside of Ghana, and all of the consulting work that I do goes back to fund the school. So, you know, hopefully once people see the actual work we're doing, we're getting a positive response. I just had a news organization come do an interview, and they took a lot of video of the students. And after that aired on one of the major stations here in the country, we had quite a few phone calls coming in. And that was really positive to me, because I think once people see it with their own eyes, then they get it, and they're excited about us being here. Before that, we're just a name, and they don't quite know why we're here and what we're up to. So that, I think, was very helpful.
It's a good name. You picked a very good name. It's not the autism school in Ghana, you know, Autism Compassion. I think it's, I mean, you could be cynical about, oh, what do they really want? But, you know, when you get a chance to see the organization and hear you talk about your work, it definitely has a sense of being more than just, it's just one little school and we just work with 8 to however many students we're able to properly serve. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean, we really want to make a bigger impact and change across the country. You know, as a BCB, I can only work with so many students at a time anyway. I can't take 300 kids. So, you know, if we can work on the continued education piece, if we can work on the awareness piece that combats human rights violations, I mean, those are huge to me. And, you know, with time, we just do good work and we're able to show that our science works, and more people will come. I know they will. For me, I also plan to be in Ghana long term. I don't plan to come back to the U.S. anytime soon. You guys can keep your snow over there. I'm happy here with my beach and my dog and everything else. But in order for this to work, I'm in it for the long run, and I'm really excited. I think it's been a fantastic 6 months. We've been open less than 6 months, and from where we've already gotten, I feel so excited and optimistic for the future.
So, Whitney, you've worked outside of the United States now for how many years have you been? You were in India for a few years.
Well, I spent 2 years in Abu Dhabi, and then I moved back to the U.S. I was in Seattle for 3 while I went forward to get my BCBA, and then I moved back to the Middle East for some time on the consulting team, and then they sent me to India for 2 years. So off and on now, it's been, 5, 6 years or so off and on being out of the country.
So let's say, having learned about being a BCBA and engaging in our work in other parts of the world, let's say everything's been super successful and, everything's running perfectly. They don't need you. You decide you're going to move back to the United States for a while. What experiences would you bring back to your work as a BCBA back in America? So what could others learn by going outside of the country?
But I think you learn more of the value of our science and what we actually can bring that's available to families. Because when you work in the U.S., I think sometimes we take for granted that we can just do this so easily for so many families. That there's insurance that covers it, that there's, schools that cover it. When you're in a place like here where there isn't insurance that covers it, that the government doesn't cover services, families have to pay what they can. Some of our families pay nothing because they can't afford anything. You really see more of the value of our science and how we shouldn't take it for granted, and we should just do all that we can when we have the opportunity to work within this field.
I feel like it's sort of analogous to as you are a BCBA and you start to understand better and better how learning occurs, right? So when you don't have an experience with it, you're just like, well, kids just learn. And then as you work more and more with kids, you're like, oh gosh, learning is actually this incredibly complex process that starts with these tiny little building blocks, right? And it's probably comparable. It's like, well, here in the United States, we just do ABA and we have all these resources available to us that we don't even realize what they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So now you know all the pieces that it takes. And it's probably something that we should really keep in mind.
So I know that you have a million hats, and I don't want to give you another hat as sort of ambassador of BCBAs who left the country to go out and do good works. But I'm going to put it on you just for a second. What would be your advice to other BCBAs who maybe they're just starting their careers or they've been working for a while and they're interested in making more of a change or more of an impact? What would you give them advice in terms of maybe starting out on this a little bit scary sounding adventure, rewarding, but big changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, if you sit and you think through it too much and you see all that can go wrong, you're never going to take the jump to do it. There's going to be things that happen that aren't going to be great. To tell you a story, when I first moved here, we had a location in a child development center. We had a classroom. And I got here and everything had been lined out for the previous 6 months. We were going to be in that classroom. We had students ready to go. I had hired staff, and then we had some complications with the owners and couldn't get on the same page. So I went from having a center, having staff, having students, and then during week 1 of being on the ground here in Ghana, having no center, still having my staff hired, but no students. And because then, the parents were torn between, do they stay at the current center? Do they come to wherever I go?
Yeah.
And, it worked out. Like, we eventually found this amazing location that we're able to do so much more there. We actually have a volunteer house next door to it. And I have staff that I work with. I have some clients in Nigeria. So some people came for training from Nigeria. They were able to stay there, be a part of the center for the 2 weeks training. And all in all, it's worked out even better than it would have originally. So I think sometimes you can do all that you can to plan for it, but eventually you kind of just have to take that risk, and things are going to happen, but you just have to keep pushing forward. And that's my biggest advice. I mean, week 1 here was a rough one.
Sounds like
and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I just quit my job and I moved to Africa. What am I doing? This is not working. And then, it comes together. And I believe if you're doing good, good things will happen. And so we just push forward, and within, a week or 2 later, we had a center. We did an opening and a soft opening, and I had staff ready to go. And before we knew it, we had a wait list going for the school. So it's been a roller coaster, but and I'm sure there's plenty more hills and loops around the corner, but we're going forward, and that's the important thing, is forward motion.
Yeah. And I think people see that, and they recognize that you have this really strong mission behind what you're doing, right? And it takes a lot to jump out there and be the person that's trying to make that type of change in an area that needs services. So when people see that, then they're going to be more willing to come forward and help out and find ways to make sure that you and your company can be successful. Yeah.
The support that we've had has been amazing. People that we didn't expect to come around and say, hey, how can I help, have been there. And I think it's been a great process so far.
That's awesome.
So Whitney, what's the next big hurdle for Autism Compassion Africa? If you can name one.
And, there's a couple.
You can name as many as you like, but
I think if I'm looking at more of autism here in Ghana, not necessarily Autism Compassion Africa, but if I'm looking at the hurdle for here, the next big hurdle I see when it comes to this field is to have people that are locals have access to our education to do the long distance learning to get certified. So if we can get more people certified, we can get more children getting access to quality education where they may not have any access at all. They may just be staying in their home right now. So that, I think, is a big piece for autism in Ghana, not necessarily the big hurdle for Autism Compassion Africa. I think our biggest hurdle is, I keep thinking of these students we have on the wait list. And for each student, we hire one teacher, which is we pay a full teacher salary. And of course, in the community that we're in, we can't request that families pay that full salary. So some pay something typical to a student fee. Those that aren't able to pay, we have a sliding scale. So they pay kind of what they can. And because we, do a lot of fundraising. And so we're looking to do some more fundraisers. We have one coming up here in April in Ghana, and we have a big one in Seattle in July. So for any of your Northwest listeners, we'll be in Seattle the end of July for our annual event. But people who are listening and who are passionate about trying to help these students, we do have a link on our PayPal on our website where people can go and give a donation. And because we're a 501c3, which is a nonprofit in the U.S., all donations are tax deductible.
And what's your website?
It's autismcompassionafrica.org.
Excellent. Well, Whitney, it was such a pleasure talking to you. It is, really amazing to hear about all the work that you and your teachers and I know your business partner have been putting in to make Autism Compassion Africa work so well and really started to change hearts and minds in Ghana. It was really just such a pleasure to hear about all of that. So thank you so very much for taking the time to call us all the way from across the globe today. We really, really appreciate it.
Great. And thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm excited to let more people know about Autism Compassion Africa, and I really appreciate the time that you've given us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're excited too. It's great to hear from you.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Thanks,
Keep doing
Whitney.
such awesome work.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Whitney for taking the time out of her very, very busy schedule to talk with us here at ABA Inside Track. It was really enlightening to hear so much about her work. If you've been following our podcast this month, then you know that all of the money that we raise through our CE processing fees for our regular episodes is going to be donated to Autism Compassion Africa. So if you have some CEs that you were thinking of purchasing for listening to some of our full-length episodes on topics from infant behavior all the way to empathy, then please do so this month so that money that we use to process your CEs can be donated in full, 100%, to Autism Compassion Africa to support the work that they are doing. We hope you enjoyed our special bonus episode. You can find Whitney online at autismcompassionafrica.org, and you can follow us at ABA Inside Track on the web and in all social media, or email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. We'll be back later this week with a preview episode talking about our next full-length exciting episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye!